Good evening, this is Christine Binger with my EDL 853 Module 3 video, where I spoke to an administrator, a special education teacher, and a paraprofessional about, working in special ed and what administrators can do and how we, as a trifecta, can work together to improve special education in our buildings. So the three people I interviewed were my assistant principal at my current school. He oversees the ELL department and the English department, which is my department. He used to work in an elementary. Good evening, my name is Christine Binger. This is my EDL 853 Module 3 video where I interviewed three people about special education and how we can all work together and comparing and contrasting these things. The three people that I interviewed, the first one was my vice principal at my current school. He is one of four vice principals, but he oversees my department, the English department, and the ELL department. He used to work at an elementary school. This is actually he's been at high school level for not even 2 years yet, so I think he's learning the high school way a little bit sometimes, so it's always interesting to hear his perspective coming from the elementary level, which sometimes is refreshing. I spoke to a SPED teacher who I have known since I was in college. She actually started as a social studies teacher, teaching for 4 years, and now she is a special education teacher for her first year at a neighboring school district, so it was good to talk to her and get her perspective. And the paraprofessional that I interviewed, I worked with my first year teaching. She is above and beyond when it comes to paraprofessionals. I adore how she works with kids. She has this great ability to speak to them, and she works well with teachers, and she is a model for a great paraprofessional, so I was very excited to get to talk to her about these questions. So the first question is the child find procedures. I spoke to the SPED teacher and she was a little unsure. Like I said, it was her first year. However, she did mention that because she teaches high school, oftentimes kids are already identified by then. So it's very rare to have a kid jump into the SPED department. However, she said that they will look at interventions and things that they can do to help the student, but usually by then SPED is not generally an option, I guess is what she said, or how I understood what she said. When I spoke to my administrator, he mentioned the PST program, which is a 2-cycle program. He said that you first attempt interventions and see what works and what doesn't work, and there's a team that you build these interventions with. You take those interventions back to your classroom, you keep the data on how they work, and then you reconvene, he said about a month later, and discuss what did and did not work, and the things that did work, you implement them across all classes, and the things that do not work, you either revise, or you may add something or take that away or whatever is fit for that student. However, oftentimes, he said that works. When it doesn't, it is after a couple cycles of trying this that then they go into SPED services and get tested and go through a whole SPED evaluation. He said at that point, when it becomes SPED services, they really involve the parent. They inform the parent of interventions and issues early on, but once SPED comes into play, he says that the parents play a huge role in that. When I spoke to the para, she didn't really know the process that it takes, but she did mention that oftentimes she will be asked her opinion about different students, and she wonders if that plays, or how much of a role that plays in how a student is serviced or how services change and things like that. Question number 2, what do they find the most most challenging part of their job in regards to special education? The SPED teacher said patience for staff and students. The student behaviors, especially when it comes to SPED, can be hit or miss some days, so sometimes it's just managing and having patience with that student. And sometimes the patience comes with staff who are non-compliant with the IEPs and modifications and accommodations that are listed. So having the patience to hold tight to what is expected but be respectful in that is the biggest challenge. The administrator said ensuring that we've given students with special needs enough life skills for after high school. He said that we oftentimes feed them with so many opportunities and resources here that when they go out into the real world and when they're done with school, he worries sometimes that we've over-serviced or that whatever resources have been available to these students are no longer available, and are they going to be able to cope with that? And he said that that's a challenge, more so it hangs on him as something that he worries about. But he didn't give me a specific directive as to this having happened before, so I am curious now, how often does that happen? What kind of role does that play? Is that something that we need to reevaluate in special education? And then the para said inconsistency between paras and teachers. So she specified one student who she works really well with in one class, but there's a different para with that student in another class, and that student treats each of them differently because they get different things done with each para. So the para I interviewed is very tough on students and expects them to do their work and walks them through it and is really hands-on. But then another para that she's referencing oftentimes does the work for them because it's easier that way. So she just specified how difficult that is because to get a student on track and doing what's expected across all classes is such a huge challenge for them. Question number 3, the most rewarding part of working with students with special needs. The administrator said, quote, "When I have the shittiest day, I think of those kids and I go see those kids and they change everything for him." He was specifying the students who are in what we call the North Wing. So they're the FLS, the severe special needs kids. They have their own curriculum, their own classrooms, and he said that he goes down there and that they are just always happy and authentic and real, and he wishes that more people would take on those qualities and mentalities that these kids have because you can't teach that. You are that, and you learn that, and you experience it, and that to him is the most rewarding thing. The SPED teacher said students improving. When she gets to work with students and see them grasping concepts and the light bulb going off, she specified that as the most rewarding thing. She also said when teachers are able to work together because it just makes the process easier and it kind of validates what's happening and what they believe should be happening with this student. And the para said building relationships with the students so that they can help them in a way that no one else can. This para in particular has great relationships with students, and it's really cool to see sometimes when a teacher can't get through, if I can't get through to a student, but she can, it's always like reward for me to watch because I'm like, oh, thank goodness someone can get through to this kid. And she's thankful because it's her. So that was a really cool perspective on it because she has a different relationship than the rest of us do with some students. What advice do they have on supervision of special education staff? The SPED teacher said to communicate, that everyone needs to be on the same page and be willing to work towards the student's needs, as that is not only the law, but that's just what's ethical. The administrator said, and this kind of made me laugh, keep your eyes on them at all times. He specified how some kids can just do the quickest thing in the smallest amount of time, and it just can have a trickle effect. So always be prepared and always be watching. And then the para said that they're more than a babysitter. When it comes to supervising, just know that I want more, as a para, I want more than just a teacher that I'm working with evaluation, because sometimes that relationship isn't good and sometimes it's not fair and equitable, and that means that they're getting multiple evaluations every single year, and they would like to see that their work is being appreciated more. How do they work effectively with parents with special needs? The administrator said to just listen. He specified times that parents have come in and just cried about what's happening, especially the students with severe special needs. He said that oftentimes you're just there to listen and to understand or try to understand their needs, and as a parent, and to let them know that they're not alone in this, because some students with special needs, it can be very overwhelming, especially in some of the households that my school deals with. We have a very low SES, it's 100%. And so some of these parents are just trying to keep jobs that are going to give them the right resources for their kid. And sometimes you just need to be that person. And he specified that as the number one thing to work effectively with parents, because it helps build that relationship. The special education teacher specified that there's minimal parent involvement because of their socioeconomic status is very similar to my schools. So they don't get a lot of parent involvement in IEPs. In fact, she specified that more often than not, parents are no-shows for meetings, so it's hard to even really get to know the parent and where their parent stands or what they think about their student, which then makes me wonder how informed are the parents on the student with the special needs, because I have found I've only been teaching for 5 years, but I've definitely found that there's a shocking number of parents who don't realize their rights and their resources that are available to them, and I think that that's really important for them to know. And then she also said that you should call home with positives and negatives. It's really easy for us to call home and say, so-and-so did this today and that's wrong, and can you talk to them, or whatever you may say. But it's just as easy to call home and say that they've been doing really well. And she said that that does help when it comes to working with parents or with students. And students know when you have called their parent and told them that something good has happened. So that also helps your relationship with them. And the para specified nothing unless she knows the parent specifically because she grew up in this town and knows people. She doesn't really talk to parents, and nobody really asked for her opinion, like in regards to parents. Like when parents ask, no one asked her opinion about the student. So I found that interesting, but also kind of not surprising because, as stated earlier, we definitely sometimes view paras as babysitters, and that's not what they are. Our next question is, how do they work differently? How do they work with regular ed students, regular ed teachers with students with special needs? The para said that different teachers want different things. So some teachers may want a lot of hands-on help all around the classroom, and some just want you to sit back and observe. So it is kind of hard to manage that. But you just have to understand what each teacher wants because they are ultimately the ones that are in charge of the classroom. But she also said that it's nice when teachers ask paras for help or advice because she specified how she's worked with some kids every year they've been in high school, so she knows them so well. Her, I guess you could say, class size as a para is so much smaller than ours as teachers, so she really gets to know the students on a different level. The administrator said because there are minimal SPED classes offered in college, that he really wants to make sure that teachers are aware of expectations according to the law, but also just ethically. We are required to follow IEPs and 504s, and we are required to do these things. And we need to make sure that we are including their needs in our daily lessons and what we're doing. So he said that that is the number one thing because he specified when he was in school, and I can agree. When I was in school, when I was in college, I only had one special education class, and it would be nice to have more and more opportunities to learn about it. And it's an important thing to have in your back pocket. And the special education teacher just said working together is important. And to attend the classes regularly. She goes to classes for all of her students at least once or twice a week to get as much information as possible and just be aware of what's taking place so that she can assist as much as possible. What advice do they have for a first-year administrator? The paraprofessionals said to get to know the paras. They're not just people in the building. They are still educators in a different way than everyone else, and they are still valuable. So just get to know them like you would a normal teacher. The administrator just said it's going to be hell, and then he suggests you stay organized. He specified how he makes a list of these are the have-to-dos and these are the hope-to-dos, and he just stays to that list. He also specified you have to say no sometimes. He pointed out a specific moment is when especially new teachers call their administrator all the time for help and assistance with a student, and he said that actually undermines the teacher, which when he explained it totally made sense. A student knows how far they can push you before you're going to call administration, and it doesn't take them long to figure it out. So he has to sometimes, as an administrator, say, no, I'm not going to help you with this, but I will sit down and meet with you about how to improve these things so that it's better for you in the classroom. Because he can't come in running every single time anyway, and it's better for the teacher to try to be able to handle different things before calling an administrator. And he also specified balancing your after-school life. I taught for 4 years in a low-income school, but nothing like what I'm currently in. And when I came to this school, the principal stood up and said, you have to find a balance. You have to have something that you do every day or every other day that really, you can focus your energy on that's for you. And I was kind of like, yeah, I know, but he's right. I mean, it'll hurt you if you don't. And I'm sure being an administrator and the amount of responsibilities, that's even more important. The special education teacher just said to be willing to work with your special education teachers and kind of start building a foundation so that you know that you have each other's backs and can help each other when necessary, and be able to provide support as the year goes on. And it just makes it easier to work together when you can start that foundation early. How do they describe the role of the special education teacher in the building? The special education teacher said trust and respect for people's opinions, especially when it comes to disciplining students. Oftentimes students with IEPs get disciplined a little differently depending on what the issue was, how they handled it, maybe what their IEP says, things like that. The administrator said he actually works with the SPED coordinator of the building, and she takes it out to the SPED teachers. So he said unless he's a SPED teacher is directly under his evaluation list for the year, very minimally does he need to talk to SPED teachers individually in that way, because he can do it through the SPED coordinator, which I found interesting, but I guess if that works for them,